Recording in progress.
As is the video and microphone on your Zoom. But this is supposed to be an interactive session, and we welcome any questions via Slido. So we're going to put a link in the chat, which you should be able to follow, and that's where you can submit questions throughout on the Q&A function. And we will also have some interactive polls, so we want to get some feedback from the people that are here. If you do want to enable captions, you can click the CC button in the toolbar on Zoom and select Show Subtitle. Then you can select subtitle settings to change the size. We've got an email address here. Samantha from Severn Trent has very kindly agreed to be our kind of technical assistant and support. So if you are having technical issues with Zoom, you can email Samantha on that email and the slide there. And for those of you that are just joining us, please note this webinar is being recorded because we've had lots of inquiries from people that can't necessarily make it this evening, and we would like to record and share. Okay, so I think without any further ado, I will make a start on our presentation. Very quick run through of the agenda for this evening. I'm the chair. My name's Alice. I work for the Severn Rivers Trust, and I'll say a little bit more about our charity in a minute. And then we're going to hear from a number of partners that are working on the CASCO, the Catchment Systems Thinking Co-op project with us, which is a national scheme which we're really proud to be part of. So we've got a speaker from the Rivers Trust, a speaker from Severn Trent, speakers from the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales. And then finally, an outline of our plans at Severn Rivers Trust, in particular the volunteering opportunities and how you can get involved. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So as I mentioned, I'll be chairing a Q&A session where you can put your questions to our panel into the Q&A function on Slido. The link is in the chat, so you can use that to type your questions and also to upvote any other questions that you would like to see answered. And we should have around 30 minutes for that, and then we will be finished by 7:30. So really packed schedule and a good agenda to run through what CASCO is all about, how we're monitoring our rivers' health, and what we're particularly doing in the Teme catchment, the river Teme catchment, as part of this exciting project. So just to kick us off then, as a welcome from Severn Rivers Trust, I'd like to start by introducing our small charity. I think it's fair to say we're a small charity with about 20 members of staff, and we've got big ambitions considering the huge area that we cover. I like showing this map because it really shows the extent of the river, right from the source to the estuary that we cover, and all the main tributaries flowing into it. And it's a largely rural catchment with some really important urban conurbations as well. With iconic species and habitats, and the Severn Rivers Trust has been established to secure a healthy, resilient River Severn for everyone, and we're working tirelessly to protect and enhance these amazing habitats along the river. Over our kind of huge catchment, we're currently, we're actually just about to release our strategy. So we've been looking at a 3-year strategy to really set ambitious targets for things like woodland creation schemes, river restoration in channel works to improve the freshwater habitats of the rivers, things like wetland creation, so that we can really deliver at pace and at scale for nature. And we've also got ambitious targets around community engagement, and that's really at the centre of what we do, including working with schools and family groups, and working with volunteers, of course, to inspire people to get involved and take action for their rivers. So CASCO represents something really exciting for us as an opportunity, and fair to say it's a chance for us to experiment and try some things out, and this webinar is actually a good example of that. We sort of a few months ago thought, why not do an online event where we can invite people, and we really kind of scratched our chins and thought, is anyone ever going to come? Should we do it in the evening to try and make it more accessible? Is anyone interested? And we've been really overwhelmed by the number of sign-ups that we've had, and obviously there is an appetite for us to kind of start sharing what we're doing and our plans so far. So it's a great opportunity for us to try something new, not only in how we communicate with our communities, but also the actual methods that we're employing on the ground. So we're really looking to develop this robust suite citizen science monitoring that we can roll out across our whole catchment alongside other monitoring to inform our work. It's a really exciting partnership as well, because this is the first time all these partners have been around the same table with a really clear aim and focus on monitoring that leads to action. So I think that's something that we're really proud of. So without further ado, I think that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over now to Paul from the Rivers Trust, who's going to give us an introduction to Casco and the kind of national framework that our demonstration site sits within. So Paul, take it away.
Thanks very much, Alice, and great to have everybody here. Thanks very much for joining. Yeah, my name is Paul Hume from the Rivers Trust, and my job is to provide technical support to people who are part of the Casco Citizen Science Project. So Casco is a bit of a mouthful. It stands for Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative, but think of it as a sort of a national citizen science initiative, which I'll explain a bit more about in a minute. But first, I wanted to say a little bit about what prompted this this project, because obviously there's been lots of citizen science work going on, really good citizen science work been going on across the country before Casco. But I just wanted to show you a few slides about the sort of the thinking behind where Casco came from. So right now, many of our rivers are polluted, and then next slide, and have experienced a sort of a staggering loss of wildlife and habitats. But next slide, they could be much better if they were healthier. They could be wonderful places for wildlife, and next slide, for us. But how? Next slide. How do we do that? How do we get from where they are now to where we would all like them to get to? And there's a quote from a famous quote from an anthropologist called Margaret Mead, who suggests the answer is us, you and me. And she said, next slide, that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And indeed, perhaps it's the only thing that ever has. And so if we go to the next slide, so if we are the answer, then what can Casco, what can this project do to help us with that? And so Casco is a 3-year innovation project, as Alice said. It's we are supposed to be trying new things out, which means that we're allowed to make mistakes and try out 2 ways of doing something. It doesn't have to be completely efficient, but we've got 3 years where we're funded by Ofwat, who are obviously the government regulator for water, and we're operating in 8 demonstration, in other words, pilot catchments where we can try these things out. Those 8 are on the screen. The team is number 2, and what the main focus, well, the theme for the team, forgive the rhyming, is creating stretches of river that are clean enough to swim in. So, related to bathing waters. That's not to say that that's all we're aiming to do, but that is one of the key themes for the team. And there are 2 really crucial elements of this project, which really make it a unique opportunity for us to grab hold of. Firstly, Casco is about working together. So working together to gather data to improve the health of our rivers. So across the country, left-hand side of this slide, there are more than 30 partner organisations in the 8 demo catchments. Many of them are working together for the first time to build citizen science capability. And in the team in particular, we have 4 main partner organisations. Tonight, we've got these 4 main partners: Severn Rivers Trust, who you've been introduced to by Alice, Severn Trent Water, the Environment Agency, and National Resources Wales. And Severn Rivers Trust have already appointed a volunteer coordinator, Alice Moore, who you may have been in communication with already as part of this event, and you'll be hearing from her anyway tonight. And so far, the 4 partners there have worked collaboratively to produce a draft list of priorities of what to monitor in the river team, where, and why, which you'll be hearing a bit more about later. They've started to think about the training and technical support that the Casco project can offer to each of the demonstration catchments and the people working within it, which includes everybody on this call today if you want to be involved. And then the other thing that's happened is, as Alice said, you've been invited here tonight. The partners got together and produced this event and invited you all here tonight to show how you can get involved. And why? Well, to paraphrase Margaret Mead's quote, we envisage the journey towards changing our rivers as being through thoughtful local groups involved in the data that's used to make decisions about the rivers. The data is almost like the currency that helps people make decisions, and if that's democratized and we're involved in that, all of us, then that allows us to make a difference. And that's part of what this whole project is about. Is can that really grow over the next 3 years? Because secondly, Casco is also about learning. It's learning by trying new things in the demo catchments. And it's also about learning from each other within the demo catchments, but also beyond. So we know that there are, as I said before, we know there are many excellent citizen science groups and volunteer groups working across the country, and several here in Shropshire that we're aware of and in touch with. But Casco aims to sort of provide the resources over the next 3 years to build on and expand this effort, and learning in terms of what works and what doesn't. For example, what methods of measuring phosphate or invertebrate species work well. What training do volunteers need to be able to become active and in this area? How can we effectively store and interpret and share the data we collect? Because we don't just want to collect the data, we want to make sure that we're involved with interpreting it and making sure that it's out there so as to create change. And how can we do things like measure the success of actions that have been taken on rivers to try and improve them, things that have already been done, like removing a weir, for example, or changing discharges from a particular location that's happened? How can we measure whether that's been successful? Can we be part of that? And can we pass on this learning everywhere? Because Casco doesn't end after 3 years, well, the project does, but the whole idea is that this citizen science movement goes on over the next decade or so. The long-term aim is, over many decades, we hope. The aim is to have an active citizen science group in every county, in every catchment, in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. That's where we'd like to be. And so if Casco can help us move towards that a few steps, then that's all to the good. Thanks, Alice. Next slide. So this slide brings together, I've sort of explained hopefully what Casco is about, but this slide is the one that is used to sort of list the official objectives of the 3-year project. It's about working together, so there's an agreed approach for people to monitor their rivers and catchments, to share the river catchment data, then learning and passing stuff on through training and through trying things out on the demo catchments, and then also so that the community and community data becomes part of how we make decisions about our rivers in the future as part of business as usual. So we're working with the professional partners, the water company and the Environment Agency on that. So next slide. In summary, this is the change that we want to see. Communities are included in collecting and sharing river catchment data so that we all have better understanding and achieve better management of our rivers. And thank you very much. Back to you, Alice.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. It's really helpful just to kind of set the scene of where our demo for the team sits within the wider kind of national framework for Casco. Thank you. We're going to hand over now to Leslie. Hopefully you can join us, Leslie, from Severn Trent to talk about Severn Trent's involvement.
Thanks, Alice. Hope I've unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie. I'm a project manager on Severn Trent's Bathing Rivers programme. And as Paul said, we are partners on the team demo of the Casco project. And my colleague Samantha is also on this webinar tonight. So we both work on the Casco project with the partners in Severn Rivers Trust and the EA and Rivers Trust, the broader organisation as well. So this is just a summary slide that I wanted to share with you to explain a little bit about the work that Samantha and I are doing specifically before I kind of come on to our very new interest in citizen science and all that has the potential to bring to our work. So the Bathing Rivers programme in Severn Trent is investing £78 million to improve water quality along more than 50 kilometres of river in Warwickshire and Shropshire. So we've got two trial rivers. We're looking to move stretches of the River Lem and the River Teme towards bathing quality by 2025. So it's quite a short-term project or trial. But just to be clear, and I wanted to say this early, that doesn't mean that Severn Trent are applying for bathing water designation, because we're not. What we are doing is working to improve the quality of the water to bathing standard as defined by the Environment Agency. And we do want to support local groups who are thinking about applying for designation. So with better sort of data sharing and community engagement, but we're not applying for a designation ourselves as an organisation. And the Bathing Rivers programme is part of a wider Get River Positive campaign, which we launched last year, with a series of commitments that aim to make our region's rivers the healthiest that they can be. Because we know that river health is essential not only to the communities that we serve as a water company, but also to our ability to provide vital water on tap, because it's where we get our water from. So it makes sense for us to take a role not only in protecting them, but also in enhancing them too. So let's talk about an elephant in the room, or the elephant in the river. Water companies and rivers. It's a hot topic right now. Yes, there's lots in the press. There's lots of conversations going on around it, and that's a lot of the conversation that we have around the Casco table as well. And how we can all play our part in this, because we know that the water sector is responsible for about 24% of pollution in our rivers in the UK. That's data that comes from the Environment Agency's data, which is reasons that rivers don't achieve good status. So it's sometimes called RNAGs, reasons for not achieving good. So we know that we've got a role to play. We're not the biggest part of the problem, but we are part of the problem. So in Severn Trent, we've already been looking at how can we bring down the harm that our assets do on rivers. We've already reduced it down from 24% to 18% in Severn Trent. So we're below the water sector average, but we still ambitiously want to bring that down to 0 by 2030. So this Bathing Rivers project that Samantha and I are working on, where we're looking at what can we do on the Lem, the team, is really helping us to sort of design that blueprint for how do we bring that harm down to 0. Until then, like I said, we know we're part of the problem, so we need to be part of the solution as well. And we can't do it all on our own. And that's why we're really lucky to have local partners who'll be rolling up their sleeves. So that includes things like working with farmers. They have a bigger impact on rivers than we do, and working with local authorities. And then working with partners like we're here tonight with our ENGOs, our regulators and other stakeholders, so Rivers Trusts and Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales, all important stakeholders for us to work with. Which kind of brings me on to the citizen science then. So the reason that we're here today, and why are we talking about this tonight? So citizen science is a new field for us as a water company. We're a sector that relies heavily on regulated data. That's what our regulators are looking for. So we want to explore what citizen science can bring to how we collect and use and look at data. So we're really keen to get involved in the Casco project. It's a really exciting demo on the team, and it'll help us kind of explore how we could use this kind of citizen data in a regulated world. But also what can we learn from experts? So Rivers Trust and Severn Rivers Trust are the experts in this field, and we're not. So we really need to learn from what we can pick up from our partners in this project, and how can we engage locally with community members and people who know the rivers and learn from them too. So that's just sort of to give you a flavour of what the Bathing Rivers programme is about and why we're involved in this Casco project. I'm just going to close on a thought that someone very wise said to me last week. We were talking about this project, and they said, by collaborating with and supporting citizen science data on this project on the team, Severn Trent are providing a potential route for citizen scientists' data to impact better water company management of river health that didn't exist before. So it's a really new route for it, and I really like that thought. And I thought, yeah, I agree very much with that, and we're really interested to see what we can do with this. So with that, I will hand you back to Alice.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Leslie. And yeah, we're really happy to be working so closely with Severn Trent on this. It's such an exciting opportunity for partnership working, and very compelling point that you finished on there about how volunteers are really actually going to make a difference and have an active role to play in how the rivers are managed and improving rivers. So yeah, that's exciting. So next I'm going to hand over to the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales to talk about their involvement in the project. And just a quick note to say, don't forget to add any questions you might have using the link in the chat so that you can ask your questions. We'll pose questions to the panelists after we've had our presentations. Okay, handing over to Environment Agency. We've got a few people, so I'll leave it to them to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Lucy Morris, and I'm work in the West Midlands area of the Environment Agency in the analysis and reporting team as a Senior Environment Monitoring Officer, and I work with Martin. We're hoping to use the data that the citizen sciences are producing to complement our own data, and that will hopefully will help plan and prioritise some of the activities that we are working on in the catchment. So I think it's over to Martin.
Oh, well, I can say my name, yeah, Martin Fenn. I work alongside Lucy in the analysis and reporting team, and not really much more to add to that, really. It's what Lucy's already said.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name's Chloe Hatton and I work at Natural Resources Wales, so just across on the other side of the border. My role at NRW is Fisheries Officer in our Mid Wales People and Places team. So the kind of patch that I cover is the large area across Mid Wales, which is across the Powys and Ceredigion local authority areas. So that covers a small section of the team on the Welsh side of the border. My work through my fisheries remit covers all sorts of things, but includes kind of consulting on permits for people working or changing our rivers, running and working with our local fishery groups and angling clubs, and sort of helping to deliver weir removals, easement projects, and also delivering grants to partners like Severn Rivers Trusts for incredible work doing fisheries habitat improvements. So obviously very excited to see some kind of focused work in the team on improving habitat and potentially water quality over the Casco project and into the future. Also sitting in our People and Places team, it means part of my role is to try and connect with other stakeholders in delivery of our kind of Mid Wales priorities. So two of our main themes in our Mid Wales area are reconnecting people and places. So obviously strongly aligns with the kind of principles of getting involved with communities and citizen science. And also sustainable management of our land, water and air is another one of our themes. So of course, yeah, excited to be involved in the Casco project and all that it brings.
Last for me, my name is Oda Dijksterhuis. I'm catchment coordinator for the team. I focus on delivering projects to make improvements on the ground, particularly looking for a water framework directive improvements. So it can be water quality, biodiversity, natural flood management, and all kinds of things related to that. Next slide, please. So between us, EA and NRW, we are really excited to be part of the Casco project. We're really keen to support enthusiastic citizen scientists, and they include existing groups that we're probably already in contact with, and we know there's probably quite a few of you on this call, so we are completely aware of the good stuff that already happens. We're committed to trying out new ways of finding solutions to environmental challenges that we're all facing. And I think, you know, we're equally passionate about all of this. And I guess the Casco provides us with a perfect opportunity, a unique opportunity to work with partners all with interest in the same fields to look at monitoring techniques, which ways work, what works where, how do we use this data, and how can we be most effective across England and Wales. Next slide, please. So in my day-to-day role, I guess, you know, as I said just now, we're focusing on environment and improving the river health. It includes things like creating marginal areas along water courses, and chop and drop dams to hold back water, both in drought and flood conditions. So yeah, on the whole, we're looking to encourage citizen science and improve our understanding of the team, to realize that, you know, our actions, we have limited resources available to target on the ground. And so, you know, having our own data as well as citizen science data to improve our image that we have of the catchment will be quite important going forward. On this slide, I've included our Inquiries West Midlands Environment Agency email address. I'm conscious that we're talking about Casco, but obviously there's lots of other good stuff going on in the team. So you may have questions or comments in relation to those things, and we're not necessarily discussing those today. So if you have any burning questions by the end of the session, feel free to use that email address and contact us. Next slide, please.
Oh, thank you. So I'll just say a little bit about how Natural Resources Wales is hoping to be involved specifically in this Team Casco demo. So hopefully you'll see from the map on the right-hand side of the screen there that only a very small part of the team catchment actually falls on the Welsh side of the border. So although other partners kind of on the call might be taking a more leading role into the delivery, we are definitely committed to linking into the demonstration catchment and all the work ongoing within it through action like sharing our existing data, information and maps. So, you know, NRW collects data on water quality and fish surveys. So we'll be sharing that across the project. Also where we have things like permitted livestock units or water abstraction or discharge points. So hopefully we'll be contributing to building up a picture of the resource use in the upper catchment. Also key one that's kind of close to my heart will be linking to the Welsh stakeholders and projects. So for example, on the right again of the screen, there's a picture of some riparian kind of fencing, which is along the side of a riverbank, creating lovely kind of habitat along the side, the kind of natural habitat along the side of the river there. So linking in with the sort of work like that we're funding around the upper Severn catchment. So you know, we can focus what work is left to do alongside other partners as part of this project, and also sharing with and promoting the Casco project with our local angling clubs, wildlife trusts and other kind of external forums. I think it's been talked about already, but really important opportunity here as well to be developing intelligence across the team catchment. So doing things like understanding hotspots or trends over time in habitat or water quality might help in future kind of target proactive work that Natural Resources Wales might be able to do. So for instance, help target our monitoring, our habitat improvement, or our kind of farm advisory visits in future. And it's yeah, in a bigger picture, looking down the line, NRW is hoping to learn from all the Casco work as to how we can interact better with citizen science in the future. And again, already been spoken about tonight, but it's a wonderful opportunity to be part of this cross-border partnership project, a kind of new space to be in with lots of different partners with lots of different skills, interests and contacts to be sat around the table. And so yes, if there's any questions that kind of fall outside of the Casco world tonight, feel free to send to the email on screen there, which is our inquiries@naturalresourceswales.gov.uk. But otherwise, yeah, hopefully you will have had a good introduction tonight. Thank you. Back to you, Alice, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lucy, Oda, Chloe and Martin. It's really great to have your perspective and yeah, just really helpful to, again, set the scene about how all of this work that we're going to be doing with volunteers and citizen science will kind of feed in to the work of Natural Resources Wales and the Environment Agency. So thank you. So next, I'm going to hand over to Alice Moore, who's going to talk in more detail about what's happening in the Teme demo area and how you can get involved. So Alice, if you're there, you can take it away.
Yep, I'm here. So hello, nice to be speaking to you all this evening. I'm going to attempt to give you a bit of an overview of what we've got planned for the Teme demo. So as you've kind of already heard, the main project partners for our demo are Severn Rivers Trust, Severn Trent Water, the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales. And as a demo, we are looking at the whole of the Teme catchment. So our overarching theme, as has already been mentioned and touched upon, is bathing waters. As Leslie said, as part of the Casco project, we're not looking to actually do a sort of bathing designation as part of the project, but we will support groups where we can if that is of their interest. But what we're looking at is the quality of the water in the Teme catchment with regards to the Water Framework Directive standards and also that considered for bathing status. So like I said, we're going to look at the catchment as a whole. We are aware that a lot of the perhaps more the popular recreation areas are perhaps towards the middle and sometimes the lower stretches of the catchment. But it was sort of identified that a lot of the potential issues for water quality in those areas could actually be stemming from the headwaters. So we chose as a demo to kind of keep it broad and look at the health of the catchment as a whole. So most of you are probably quite familiar with the Teme catchment, but for those who aren't, it's a rural catchment. It's characterised by its rolling hills and attractive valleys. The Teme itself is a site of special scientific interest for the rare plants and animals that live within the river and on its banks. And part of the catchment, or part of the Clun catchment, is actually also a special area of conservation for its population of freshwater pearl mussels. So it is, it's a very nice, very lovely catchment, and also very popular when it comes to recreation. So we know there's a lot of wild swimming, paddling and also fishing within the catchment, so it is well used. It's not a catchment without its issues though. So you can see from this photo here, there's issues of drought and low flows, particularly in the sort of drier times of the year, summer months, and these typically affect the sort of headwaters, but they're perhaps becoming more frequent in when we're seeing them. There's all sorts of issues leading from this in terms of obviously the amount of water to actually be present for swimming, or also in terms of its impact on dilution, in terms of which relates to the water quality, presence of algae, things like that. Adversely, the catchment's also quite prone to flooding. So you can see here we've got a picture of the main Teme in flood. Obviously that has its own issues in terms of kind of where we've got storm overflows and just generally washing sediment off from within the catchment down into the rivers. We've also got issues of kind of livestock. It's very much a catchment dominated by its agriculture. So we know there are issues with in relation to this in terms of soil management within the catchment, and that's kind of all brought together and some of the issues that we're going to try and look at within this project. So as Paul alluded to earlier, as a sort of demo, we've sort of, as partners, we've sat around the table and we've kind of looked at what we want to achieve, what the kind of outcomes need to be from this project. So as a demo summary, we're looking for the development of a catchment monitoring plan and volunteer engagement programme that will focus on water quality testing, in particular different citizen science methods. And the overall aim is ultimately to improve the health of the river Teme whilst delivering integrated outcomes. So this will include, having the citizen science programme, developing that's something that's quite new to us as a trust, but also having better use of the data and a communication strategy to allow us to kind of engage with the communities. So in terms of the objectives, and I appreciate this is perhaps the boring part of the thing, you want to know what we're going to do, but I'm trying to show you how we've kind of come to these decisions. So in terms of the objectives that are going to kind of feed into the data we're going to collect, we've identified sort of 4 questions that we sort of think need to be answered. So the ultimate one is, how healthy is the team? It's not something that, you know, we can just say for sure this is the health. Obviously, you know, there's other catchments that are perhaps a bit more knowledgeable, and we know there's certain issues, but ultimately, what is the health of the team? What are the main contributors to the poor river health, if it is poor? Where are those trouble hotspots? How effective is the work of demo partners? So there's a lot of work already being carried out within the catchment, both by project partners here today, but also lots of other organisations working in the catchment as part of the CAVA group. And where should we prioritise future efforts to gain maximum benefit? So it's a 3-year project, as Paul said. And we've kind of split these down into what we want to try and establish within sort of year 1 of the project, or what we see as sort of early priorities, and then perhaps where we go or what we look at from sort of year 2 and beyond. So initially, this is how we've done it. So the first 2 questions, ultimately we need to know what are the issues and where are the issues before we can perhaps look at putting some of those measures in place to rectify them. So obviously, looking at kind of our objectives for year 1, or the initial stage, we've then got come up with these sort of 4 questions that we're looking to answer. So ultimately, where are the gaps in our knowledge and existing monitoring? What's the extent of bacterial pollution within the team? So linking this directly back to you know, bathing water standards in terms of bacteria levels. Where are the phosphate hotspots? So we know that there's a phosphate issue within the catchment, but perhaps, you know, there's certain areas that are more of a hotspot than others. And also, where are these misconnections and high density sort of livestock areas that are causing these pollutions, you know, and its tributaries. So that's a lot of information about what we want to try and find out. But I expect most of you here today want to know how we're actually going to go about doing this. And for those of you who've heard me talk about this project before, and you've heard me mention it's very much in the development phase. It's in the development phase. I'm pleased to say it's now starting to transition from the development phase into delivery. So obviously the stakeholder engagement has been a massive part of this project. You know, we've been in touch with, as well as hosting this webinar tonight for you all, we've been in touch with several groups, communities and companies that have got interest in the catchment. And this is really where the sort of partnership approach has worked really well, because it's allowed us to get the information out to a large audience. And I think that's kind of shown today by, you know, the interest that we've had in this webinar and the number of people that we've got along. The whole aim of our stakeholder engagement has been to inform people about the project and to encourage them to get involved. And hopefully from tonight, you'll go away with sort of some ideas on how you can get involved. So we're also aware there's a lot of interest in the project from beyond the team catchment itself. You know, this includes from neighbouring CABA groups and also citizen science groups that are operating beyond the team catchment. And in the ethos of Casco is very much to be able to share information and learning beyond the demo areas. And this is something that we're very keen to do as part of our team demo. We're still currently in the process of working out the best way to do that. And we have actually within the Slido thing got a poll to run on this. So we want to know what your preferred method of communication would be. It's, you know, it needs to work for the people within the catchment and beyond. So would you prefer to have sort of a monthly, or probably not monthly, but quarterly newsletter, say with updates, or to be on an email list to get information emailed out to you? Or would you rather just go to a web page and know that there's a web page where information will be updated? So if you'd like to complete that poll when Samantha's set that up, that would be really appreciated. In terms of the next one down, which is reviewing existing data and monitoring. So we know there's a lot of monitoring already carried out in the catchment, you know, be that from the regulators such as EA and NRW, but also from Severn Trent as part of their monitoring and part of their project. But there's also a lot of citizen science groups that are already active in the catchment through CBRE, the Angling Trust, Shropshire Wildlife Trust, and also some independent groups as well. And we've reached out to a lot of those, but there could well be more than what we are currently aware of. But what is apparent through this is that there's a potential for some overlap in what's been monitored. But there's also potential to be some gaps. So our first challenge is very much to try and bring all this data together and and kind of map it in a way that we can work out and we can visually see what's been monitored where. And this would then be useful for, you know, people who are monitoring in the catchment, for the regulators seeing what's been monitored where. But as well as this, it'll also allow us to kind of prioritise where we do some or where we carry out the monitoring for Casco. But it'll also identify areas for data validation. So if we know that there is, for example, a sond in at a certain point, we can use that to kind of compare citizen science methods against other data. Or if we know that there's some lab analysis being carried out, we can try and kind of link the two together. For the bottom two ones of these, I'm going to kind of cover them in some subsequent slides because they require a bit more detail. So for the River Blitz and Litter Pick events, the idea of these is that they are large-scale engagement opportunities that anybody can get involved with and include sort of mass participation. So you can see from the tiered structure here on the left, this has been produced as part of some of the national documents. And you can see we've got sort of tier 0 at the bottom, which is this mass participation level, then going up to the perhaps more typical citizen science, so water quality testing, then up to more target professional and onto court case. So this River Blitz and Litter Picking very much sits with kind of this tier 0, so no prior experience is required. It might be something completely new to doing. You know, that's the whole idea, is it's kind of a stepping stone to get into this this area really, and then if they want to, they could go on beyond, or they could just stay at that kind of tier 0. So the first of these events that we're running is actually our Severn Spring Clean. So it's something that we at Severn Rivers Trust are running across the Severn catchment from the 25th of March to the 2nd of April. But obviously because of Casco, we have got a focus on the Teme catchment in particular. It just allows people to get out and about, collect some litter, we'll collect some data on the litter that's found, things like that. Provide a bit more information on that towards the end. For the River Blitzers, this is something that's currently being worked on by the Casco at a national scale. They're kind of developing a bit of a blueprint for that. And so we are hoping kind of off the back of that, that once that's developed, that we'll be able to run something like that as an opportunity later in the year. So moving on to some of the more sort of specific questions that we want to try and identify. The one relating to bacterial pollution. We're looking to carry out monitoring for bacteria hotspots and to identify potential sources. Some of these might be more obvious than others. And then we'll consider the findings of these sort of against the thresholds considered for bathing waters. So for this monitoring, lab analysis is obviously the gold standard in terms of being able to quantify levels of fecal indicator organisms. But it is quite costly when it comes to rolling it out on a large scale. The logistics of collecting all the samples in, getting them off to a lab, and also from a volunteer's perspective, it only actually involves collecting the water samples, so you don't necessarily get this full rounded level of involvement and kind of seeing the results. So in the spirit of trying things in Casco and trying different things, as Paul mentioned earlier, we can try things, see if they work. If they don't, then we move on. So bearing this in mind, we're going to try a couple of other bacteria monitoring methods. So this is going to include the bacteria growth check strips and the compartment bag test. Both of these are semi-quantitative in terms of the results that they give out. And then the other one that we're potentially going to look at is the tampon test, which is purely a presence-absence indicator. We may well try that and decide that it's always shown a presence, in which case we don't take it any further, or it may have its uses. We'll kind of have to try that and see. We'll also may look into using some of the proxy parameters, linking that to bacteria as well. So there's opportunities for various different monitoring as part of that. Moving on to the sort of phosphate question, in terms of attributing, a particular tributary that perhaps contributes the highest phosphates to the main Teme. So like I said, we know there is an issue with phosphate in the catchment, and a lot of work has already been carried out looking at phosphate monitoring, particularly in the sort of neighbouring Y catchment, and also through Cardiff University. Lots of research has been done of the pros and cons of using something like HANA checkers against test strips. You know, we're working alongside these partners to kind of take that into account. There's also a phosphate sampling has been looked at on a national level by their method audit review. So there may well be kind of other things that come out from that. But in the meantime, we are going to look at carrying out our sampling using a combination of the HANA checkers and the test strips. But we'll combine this with some of the use of spatial mapping for land use and farm locations to try and help identify some of these potential sources, and also through cattle counts. So this is something that we can perhaps look at with the regulators that perhaps already carry out some of this work as well. So the last one in terms of kind of monitoring, I guess, is the in terms of kind of identifying misconnections and the high density livestock areas. So for this, we're looking at trying to use a version of the Rivers Trust's outfall safari as a sort of method to try and kind of identify some of these misconnections and try and then assess them for pollution. And also some of the catchment walkovers and time-lapse photography. So the thing with Casco is not everything has to necessarily be carried out by the citizen scientists themselves. We can combine it with other data. We know that the likes of the EA and NRW carry out catchment walkovers in certain areas, so perhaps we can build, you know, we can build in that data as well. For the outfall safari, it will be a good trial because from my understanding it's been used in quite urban areas prior, whereas obviously the team catchment is quite rural. So it will be good to sort of use a form of that and see if we can kind of make it work in a slightly different setting. And then, yeah, like I say, we'll try and build in with some of the existing work carried out by the agencies. So where are we going to try and collect this data? Well, this is in essence still yet to be determined. It largely dependent on the location of volunteers, because we don't want volunteers to be travelling miles across the catchment, but it will also depend on the parameters. So in order to try and identify the tributary contributing the highest phosphate levels, we're obviously going to need to carry out wide scale sampling within all these tributaries. From the catchment monitoring mapping, we should also be able to identify gaps in the existing monitoring and try and fill some of those with monitoring as part of the project. And if we identify some of the issues or some of the misconnections, we may also choose to target some of the monitoring in those areas as well. And as I mentioned earlier, if we've got opportunities to kind of do data validation, then it makes sense to do that. We also want to, like I say, target the monitoring around the areas that we've identified issues. What we're going to do with the data, so this is perhaps one of the most frequent questions, you know, what we're going to do with all this data once we've collected it. And we are really keen for it to be useful data. So obviously we're working alongside the EA and NRW to ensure where possible that, you know, the data is of use to them. And as they've mentioned, you know, they're keen to have an involvement and where possible, feed in and also be able to use the data. And this is something being looked at a national scale as well in terms of the use of third-party data by the agencies. We're also keen that although collected at a local level, that we can have a bit of a wider picture, so a catchment picture of the results. So we're looking to replicate something like the West Country CSI programme, which amalgamates the data from sort of over a year to produce a scorecard. So this isn't easy to visualise. The top right-hand photo here is a snapshot of that. It's easy to visualise. It shows trends over a year and from year to year, and also crucially it can kind of be built up over time, so we can add parameters on as we you know, get acclimatized to running this as a program, and we perhaps want to broaden out in what we're looking at. Another thing is we would quite like to look at the feasibility of either developing or utilising an app or website that can notify river users of the conditions in their area. So this is something that is being looked at as part of Severn Trent's Green Recovery Project. It's also something that's kind of been touched upon from the Rivers Trust in terms of their sewage data as well. So if perhaps we can build something into that, we're probably not going to have the funding to actually develop something, but it's certainly something we want to look at so that data is useful to those that are using the rivers. And if you recall back to the earlier kind of slide in terms of future aims, one of those being where do we target future efforts? We very much want to be able to use the data to kind of feed into that. So if we identify areas where we've got phosphate issues or where there's misconnections, if we can kind of use that to draw up project proposals and instigate work to be carried out there, then we certainly will. That's everything on that. Shall I go straight into how they can get involved, Alice?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump back on and reintroduce you, Alice, to give the next presentation on how people can get involved. And just a quick note to say thanks for all the questions coming in. We're trying to keep track of them, but just a reminder to add them on Slido. Press the Q&A button in the top blue ribbon on the web page, and you can add your questions. So take it away, Alice.
Sorry, you've drawn the short straw of dealing with me for most of tonight. So yeah, in terms of how you can therefore get involved with the project, mentioned our Spring Clean event earlier. So this is our sort of large scale participation event running from the 25th of March till the 2nd of April. It is running across the whole Severn catchment, but we've got a particular focus within the team. So cleans can be carried out anywhere. We have got an organised clean taking place in Ludlow on the 28th. That should be the 28th of this month. I've not put March on that, but it is the 28th of this month from 12 till 2. So if you're in that area and you want to join up with that, please do get in touch and I can provide more information. And as part of this, we're also going to be doing a survey of the litter found to help give us an idea of the types of litter that's been found, and also down to perhaps a bit more detail in terms of some of the brands that are cropping up regularly, and we'll be feeding that back into kind of other information, other projects. But it'll be really good if we can to have an idea at this point of what the litter issue is within the team catchment. And if you wanted to organise your own clean, that was absolutely fine. We can help with supplying litter picking kits and guidance on that if that's of interest as well. Second way to get involved is to join us as a Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative volunteer representative. So we're currently recruiting for 2 volunteers to join us within the sort of demo team, so to speak, to help represent the voice of volunteers on the project. There's no point in us developing these plans and running ahead with them if they don't work for the volunteers on the ground that are going to be involved. So really keen to have volunteers involved within the kind of project discussions and kind of help shape them. So tasks are likely to include attending the demo meetings, helping test the different methods, providing feedback from the volunteers' perspective, and like I say, assisting with the plans. In terms of what's in it for you guys, well, obviously there's the opportunity to represent the voice of your peers, so the volunteers, on this innovative and exciting project. The opportunity to network and meet new people, and also the ability to make a difference. You know, this project will hopefully make a difference in the team catchment, and by being involved with that, you're actively contributing to that. And there's also the opportunity to feed it on a national scale. So we keep referring to all these things that are kind of happening within that national scale, and they are equally keen to have feedback from the volunteers. So they've produced a charter, and they want to make sure that what's produced or what comes out of that again works on the ground. So there's opportunities to feed into that as well. And we anticipate it'll be around 1 to 2 days a month sort of time commitment, so not massive. And like I say, we're kind of advertising for 2, so it would, you know, could be shared and not necessarily needed to kind of be there every month. So if you're interested, or if you think you might be interested and you want to have more of a chat about that, please do get in touch. Or if you look on our Severn Rivers Trust website, there's a bit more information on there as well. Another way to get involved is to feed into the sort of monitoring mapping. So as we said, our sort of first challenge is to work out what's been monitored where within the catchment, have that in some sort of visual form that we can then share with others so that they know what's going on in the catchment. So it's really a kind of plea to anybody that is already monitoring in the team to sort of get in touch. You know, we'd like to know where you're collecting data and also what it is that you're collecting, so the parameters that you're monitoring, so that we can include that within the mapping. Obviously, like I said, we're aware of certain groups, but there's probably others that are kind of carrying out your own independent monitoring. It'd be really good to know that. And then also, you know, you can perhaps link up with others that are monitoring nearby. And finally is to get, you know, sign up to get involved with the monitoring that I've just outlined before. So, you know, do you want to get involved with the river monitoring and surveying? Help us test different methods. Well, if you do, then it would be really great to hear from you, you know, and we can get you signed up, and then we can look at, from sort of the end of spring to summertime, commencing some of this monitoring. So if you want to express an interest in any of these opportunities that I've just sort of mentioned, feel free to contact me on the email address shown. We'll also try and share the email address in the chat if possible, in case you want to sort of take it an email another time. That's everything from me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Alice. I'm really delighted to see us getting into the nitty-gritty now of some of the methods we're actually going to be trialing, and can't wait to get volunteers out on the ground collecting this data. And as you said, we're aware there are lots of volunteers already out collecting data, so we're really keen to link in with those people who are already doing this, and boots on the ground and eyes and ears in the river catchment around the Teme and beyond. So it's lovely to have so many people here, and lots of really good comments and questions coming in. Please do keep them coming in. There are lots now. I was thinking earlier, oh gosh, you haven't got any, we're gonna have to start making some up. But yeah, there are plenty now. We probably won't have time to get through them all, but bear with us. I've got Samantha on the call here, and she's going to be funneling questions through to me from the Slido, and then I will be posing them to our panelists. So if you are going to be answering questions, if you could turn your camera on, and then when invited to talk, if you can unmute yourself. The first one that's come in is, what's the difference between this Casco project and the pilot and the team? So we talk about Casco quite casually, and we're very used to talking about it, but obviously this is probably quite a new project for people. So Alice, do you want to just quickly explain how the team demo sits within the wider Casco project? Yeah,
so essentially it is the same thing in that our team demo is operating under this national Casco project. So as Alice says, we do tend to talk fairly flippantly about this, and we perhaps do change between when we refer to it as the national level and the team demo a bit interchangeably. But yeah, so the team demo is a part of the national Casco project. I hope that answers that.
Thanks, Alice. Yeah, and it's also important to know that we as a demo partnership are feeding up into the national framework, so we're really active. There's a technical steering group and working group for doing things like methods audits for different types of system science methods. There's a communications working group thinking about how we actually communicate with our audiences and who our audiences are and how we're going to reach them. So there's a kind of two-way dialogue going between our demo that's on the team catchment that sits as part of 8 demos nationally, all with different themes, and we're working together to kind of work through this process of recruiting, training, supporting volunteers, and getting to a point where we've got really robust data collection methods with mapping and visualization by the end of the project. Okay, the next question. How do you plan to interface with other catchment partnerships in the 7 which are developing citizen science approaches at the same time? I'm going to hand this back to you, Alice. I've got a feeling a few questions might come your way, but I know you have already been talking with some really active groups who maybe aren't within our kind of border for the team catchment, but who are really active and we want to work with and learn from. So do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so yeah, we're obviously aware that there's lots of groups and indeed just general interest from beyond the Casco project area, and like I say, the ethos from Casco is that we want to be able to share this learning out, and certainly from us at Seven Rivers Trust, it's something that we're really keen to kind of develop a bit of a water quality testing program that we can then roll out to other catchments. Perhaps the thing with that is it's going to take time, I guess. It is something that's fairly new for us at the Seven Rivers Trust, so it's not something that we can necessarily provide lots of advice and learning on straight away. We're going to need to try some of these things and then be able to roll them out in order to be able to provide that support. But we absolutely want to be able to share what we find and our learnings from that. So my recommendation is to kind of indicate to us within the Slido your preferred sort of method of communication, and then I will try my very best to kind of keep you all informed of that. And then I anticipate that we'll perhaps run either something similar, or we'll share via social media and different platforms, kind of a learning as we go along as well.
Brilliant, thanks Alice. The next one, Leslie, we're going to put you on the spot now. So you'd mentioned a statistic when you were talking earlier, 24% of river pollution comes from water companies, and someone's asked if is there a report that you can share, or information about where that statistics come from?
Yes, there is. So that is EA data that's on their website. It's in the data section. I've just sent a link actually to Samantha, and she's going to post it in the chat. It's environment.data.gov.uk, and then catchment planning. It's in that part of the EA website, but Samantha's going to post the link.
Brilliant, thank you, Leslie. Okay, next question is from somebody who's already out and about. So I get data of water samples from my river's head bailiff. Where can I find a comparison of what I'm looking at to see how good or bad the water quality is? Is there someone from EA who can answer this question?
It's not fully straightforward to be able to get a true comparison depending on where they are and what river it is. So we obviously have the Water Framework Directive that we look at certain parameters, and from there we have what we call our sort of good moderate boundaries, and so from them we're able to work out whether the water quality is good or not. Usually they are set over 12-month periods, so we're looking at annual averages quite often, especially for nutrients such as phosphates, but they are quite often set up on site-by-site basis, so it is difficult. There are several different older versions before Water Framework Directive of what people can look at as what were used for thresholds. Like the Freshwater Fish Directive and things like that will give you ideas for what levels of dissolved oxygen are expected. But yeah, it's not quite as straightforward as being able to say, you know, a reading of 0.12 is a high level of phosphates.
Martin, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
Is it possible, do you think, for us to think about whether we can because we're dealing with one catchment, and so the number of sites that where the thresholds change won't be as much as they would be across the whole country, because I know there's guidance that got depending upon all kinds of things, factors within the country, pH and and so on. But could we sort of come up with, as part of this project, would that be something that we could come up with, where we could produce guidance for areas of the team, so that even if there's some uncertainty, if you're very close to the threshold, you're not quite sure whether you're above or below. But if you're miles above or miles below, people would have an idea. Is that something that would be possible, do you think?
It is a question that is so often asked that it would be quite remiss of the group not to attempt, I think, to actually have a look in to see if we could do something. Yeah. So it is something that is regularly asked by citizen science across the board. So I can't see why it's not something we can look into. It wouldn't be easy, and it would be very, it wouldn't be a precise figure, but we could give maybe a range or something.
Thanks.
Great, thanks Martin, thanks Paul. I can just tell from the questions coming in, there are so many people itching to just get out there with their wellies and Hannah checkers and start sampling, and I know lots of people already are coordinating themselves and doing that already. So questions come in, someone is ready to go. Where can I send my citizen science data? So Alice, are you able to answer that one? And give a bit more info about how people can send in data and what they can expect, what will happen when they get involved.
You're a bit muffled there, but I think I got that in terms of where can they submit their data.
Correct.
So I guess there's sort of two parts to that. One, in terms of obviously initially we're going to be quite focused on the biological monitoring and the phosphate in terms of actual sampling we're doing. I guess that's not to say that you can't contribute other data. So without having actually done it yet, I'm going to say send it over and we'll see what we can do with it. But I guess the other side to that is, you know, what are you yourself, if you're already collecting data, what are you collecting that data for? Have you got a kind of a purpose or an interest? And is that something that A, we should be considering as part of the project, or B, is that for something else and we can perhaps tie into that? So get in touch and I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you about it.
Excellent, thanks Alice. Okay, next question. I'm a science teacher and a volunteer, and a major gap is in our schools, so older pupils need to be involved more, and it's a legacy for generations. Open up for discussion. Alice, I'll ask you to unmute, but I can talk a little bit about this as well. But do you want to say a little bit more about how you're planning to involve young people in Casco?
Yeah, so obviously alongside the individual volunteers that are already or going to be carrying out sampling, we'll be working with certain groups that we've perhaps targeted, or groups that express an interest, and try and get them involved and get them out and about. You know, within a trust, we've got a very strong affinity to getting young people involved in the environment and involved in monitoring, and that'll be very much the same through this project. So yeah, I mean, if you know of individual groups that are interested, then again, get in touch and let us know. And I'm more than happy to kind of progress discussions with that. Don't know whether you want to add anything more, Alice.
Yeah, well, you've said it perfectly. Thank you, Alice. But I think I would just say, with my hat of head of community engagement for Seven Rivers Trust, is we're really keen to do more work with schools. And I think we're building up a strong kind of programme for primary school children, but we recognise that secondary school children and college students could be doing a lot more with. The challenge that we've got really is trying to get through the course, so get teachers on board. So whenever we meet teachers who are keen, we really want to hear from them, because there are opportunities for young people to volunteer and take action through things like work experience programs or sessions that we can deliver with statistics and plastic liquids and things. So yeah, if you are one of those teachers, one of those rare secondary school teachers who's got a bit of time or passion to get your young people involved, then please do get in touch, because we'd love to hear from you. Okay, next question. How can the differences between the EA data and simpler methods be reconciled? Martin, you're smiling. Is that something you can come on and just say a little bit about?
It's obviously something that we get asked a lot about, and we do have lots of bits of information that's available to show the differences between EA data and citizen science data. So there's been work ongoing by Cardiff University that have produced reports to look at how good the citizen science phosphate data was using strips or the hanometers, and comparing that with EA data, and that sort of showed that the strips weren't quite as accurate, but the Hano actually did sort of correlate quite well with the EA data. And just so people are aware as well, at the moment that CEH, so that is the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, I think, they're also looking into the use of citizen science and EA data, and they're looking the way how it can be integrated to produce spatial assessments. So this is being looked at a national level as well. So it is something that we're aware that needs to be focused on, and it is being done, and definitely the Casco project will feed into that work.
Alice, can I say something?
Yeah, go for it, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Martin. And also, you know, this whole Casco project is about the demos, learning things, which gets passed around and then eventually, hopefully, passed across the whole country. And one of the things that we're encouraging people to do as innovation, as part of the innovation within the demos, if that's appropriate, is to do comparative studies. So if there are citizen science methods with particular bits of kit which can be compared against agency measurements, then we start to get an idea of, you know, what the differences are, what the uncertainties are, because knowing that means that if we've got lots more people and eyes and ears on the ground in terms of citizen scientists, then there are agency monitoring points across the catchment, which is likely to be true, then we've got a very good idea then of how comparable the citizen science data is. And one of the things we want to do within the Casco project is to work with the partners, Severn Trent Water and the agency, to say, well, if we're going to try and answer certain questions, what are the appropriate methods? And for some questions, the appropriate methods of sampling might be to go for very accurate measurements. But in some cases, less certain, less accurate methods can be appropriate, because we want to know, is it very high or is it very low? And so I think that reconciliation needs to be something that we think about in the context of the questions that we're asking.
Great, thank you, Paul. Okay, so next question. I think I'm going to ask Alice again. Sorry, Alice, you're getting lots of questions. So farmers are citizens too. How do you think you will shape your plans to support the recruitment of these citizens onto the project?
So yeah, absolutely correct. Farmers are a big part of our catchment. As I said, agriculture is a massive industry, particularly in the Teme catchment. We have, as part of other work that we do within Severn Rivers Trust, we've got good connections with some of the landowners, and they attend our catchment CABA partnership, sit on that panel. So we'll absolutely be kind of going out to them, and in many cases already have, to let them know about the project. We've also, again, through other projects, got sort of farmer steering groups that are set up. So we have put information out through them. And ultimately, yeah, if they want to get involved, great. We can't force them to get involved though. So we know there are lots of landowners that are really keen to participate in the project. And yeah, I think we've got lots of different avenues that we will and we already have pursued. Yeah, then we may come across some barriers potentially with landowners in perhaps not wanting us to discover the findings that we may or may not find. I guess that's another challenge for us as a kind of project to consider down the line as well.
And I'll add as well, Alice, that there are 3 other catchments where farming is a big part of the demo. East Anglia, the Wensum catchment, has got a farm cluster group of active farmers who are looking at phosphate measurements. The Usk is focusing specifically on agriculture, and the Arran and Rother are focusing on soils with respect to sediment runoff from farmers' fields with farmers. So that there's possible for learning from other catchments, as well as passing stuff on from this catchment to others through the Casco communication channels. Great,
thank you, Paul. And yeah, I think it's fair to say Severn Rivers Trust work really closely with farmers and landowners. So it's a really big part of what we do, so that we can make these large-scale improvements at a landscape scale. We rely on cooperation and good relationships with landowners, and that is absolutely true in the team, doing lots of natural flood management work, for example, and yeah, lots of great collaboration with farmers. So that's going to be really important as part of Casco and our monitoring. Okay, next question. Paul, I think I'm going to pick on you, because I'm not sure if you've had a question to answer yet or for a while. Will you produce an ongoing resources list of where kit can be sourced?
You're a bit muffled. Ongoing resources list of what, sorry?
Where people can source kit and equipment.
Yeah, so the way that Casco is working is it's sort of, there are people from the various demos who are on some working groups collaboratively, sort of looking at what kit have people got experience with. So what's the long list of all the kit that's out there, and what kit have people found has worked well for answering certain questions. My colleague Simon Browning is leading that on phosphates at the moment. Joe Pecorelli down in Zoological Society for London is leading on the fish question. And so it's a sort of parallel track. Some people are working on that across all the demos. And then we're also asking people, whilst they're doing the demos, to bring their experience and to try new things out, or to try things out, so that we can, by the end of the project, we will have you know, we want to be able to have produced some guidance that will probably sit on a website. Now, right now, that's happening, and that won't be published properly until, you know, at least the second year of the project. But that doesn't mean that we can't answer that question right now from what we already know. So if you've got a specific question about kit, and you're working with Alice, then feed it through to Alice, and Alice can feed it through to me. If you're not working with Alice and you just want to ask, pass it on to me. I don't know if my email contacts are on the details, Alice, but you know, if you're somewhere else other than the team and you want to know something, then send it through and we can tell you what we already know. But it's work in progress, effectively. But that's not to say we have to wait till the end to be able to answer the question.
Thank you, Paul. I'm trying to work out what's going on with my microphone, so sorry if I am a bit muffled, but I'll carry on and hopefully you can hear me well enough. Okay, so the next question, not sure who to direct this to. Alice, I might pick on you to begin with, but then maybe others who can input. So are you able to use the Teme EA physical, chemical, I'm guessing, phys chem data sets to understand the thresholds for pollution factors in the team? And tribes for citizen science, but I'm guessing that's also tributaries, tribs for citizen science. So apologies if I've butchered your question, whoever this come from. But you're able to use the Teme EA data sets to understand the thresholds for pollution factors in the Teme and its tributaries for citizen science to use as trigger levels.
So I might leave the aspect relating to trigger levels to someone from the EA to answer, but in terms of can we use that data, yes, absolutely. And that is something that we'll be looking to include within the sort of the mapping of what's been monitored where, pulling out that data from the EA WIMS for the main river and all the tributaries, alongside other data from Natural Resources Wales over the border and that from Severn Trent as well. So yes, we will be able to use that. I don't know whether Martin, Lucy or Oda can answer a bit about using that to kind of detect trigger levels.
Well, I think it was something that Martin was mentioning earlier, that we can have a look at, you know, the results that we're finding, the results of WFD classification, etc. As I say, it could be quite difficult, but it's something that we would like to look into. We've been asked about it many times.
Yeah, but all our data is open data as well, as was said there, so people can get hold of that. We can possibly put that in the chat as well. I can put that in the chat for people, the link. So, but yeah, we will look into how easy it is to share those sort of like trigger levels.
Can I say something as well? Sorry, Alice. You were talking about scorecards, Alice Moore, and I think somebody's put in the chat that, you know, without trigger levels, how do you know what's good or bad? And you know, so it's a perfectly valid question, and I think it'd be good if we could work on that with the agency and find some guidance there. But I think the scorecard that you showed in your slides, Alice, that was from, I think it was from West Country Rivers Trust. One of the things that I know they've done there, and my colleague Simon Browning was involved with that, is that they've looked at regular monitoring in certain places, in many places across the catchments they're working on. And because they're looking at things in time, you can see whether the water quality is getting worse or getting better. So it's still important to know, is that good or bad in the grand scheme of things? But also that trend of whether things are getting better or worse is really important. If you do things consistently on your tributary or your reach of river, then that's really valuable within itself, regardless of what the thresholds are. So the thresholds are important, but they're not the only thing that we should be using to try and see whether to think about the health of the river.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. I'm going to keep you on the line, I think, for the next question, which hopefully you can speak to. So somebody's asked, the two water companies with the highest number of storm overflows, Yorkshire Water and Northumbrian Water, don't seem to be part of Casco. And do you know why not? Can you say a little bit about how the kind of Casco demo sites were selected and partners were kind of brought into this project?
So all water companies were invited. not all responded, or not all responded in time for the bid because it had to be in by a deadline. I do know that, and the selection of the sort of, so yes, because it's funded by Ofwat, absolutely every water company in the country was part of the invitation. Why certain locations were selected was to try and get a variety, and depended upon sometimes where the work was already done, or sometimes because work had not been done. So there was a whole variety of reasons, and trying to get a variety of catchments. In terms of those two specific water companies, I don't know why Yorkshire are not in unless they didn't respond or missed the deadline. I do know that Northumbrian have, since the project started, said they want to be involved and are trying to put money into their own demo catchment independently of the money from Ofwat, but trying to link in with what's going on in Casco to be part of the overall programme. I suspect, as is often the case with these things, that you get some early adopters of new ideas, because I think there are other water companies, Wessex are not on that list either, but they've expressed an interest, that you get early adopters. And because we've had a lot of early adopters of this idea, it won't be long before all of them are involved. So I suspect Yorkshire will be involved in the long term, but I can't say that for sure. Does that help?
Really helpful, yeah. Thank you, Paul. And it's just nice to share a little bit of background about how the bid was put together and how the partnerships came together to secure this funding. So there's been a question that Samantha might have put to me, or it might have come from somebody, but asking if we can deal with unanswered questions in an FAQ or group response after the event. And I think that's a chance, if you can still hear me, for me to mention the working group for communications, the national working group, are looking to update our websites. We're aware it's quite out of date at the moment, and that's for the whole of the national Casco project. And in there, the intention is that there will be this kind of go-to responses for frequently asked questions, and also dedicated pages for each of the demo catchments. That is still in design, but certainly we will look to answer those kind of questions that we get lots about how the data will be used, about how we're responding to different issues and pressures that the river faces. So that is our intention, but as ever, it takes a bit of time with the development and design of good quality communication, so bear with us, but yeah, certainly the intention is to have an FAQ kind of sheet that people can go to find out more, and we're sharing contact details for various individuals and organisations within this session as well, so you can get in touch with us directly if there's anything you want to follow up that we don't have time for today. Okay, so the next question, will you be covering the data platform and mapping being used? Are you planning to integrate with the EA Catchment Data Explorer or the CABA data maps? Who would like to, I'll ask for a volunteer to answer this one, because there's a few people I think could jump on and respond to this.
I'll jump on if you want.
Great, thank you.
Partly because I am sitting on the, again, we keep referring back to these national discussions, but I do sit on the National Data Platforms Working Group. So as part of that, we are looking at the various different existing data management platforms, and the hope is out of that kind of a few will be identified as depending on what it is that you're looking at, that the few will be identified as being recommended to use or particularly good. In terms of what we will initially be using, we within Severn Rivers Trust use EpiCollect and Survey 123, so they will probably be our initial like forms for actually collecting the data in. But that's not to say that we won't, off the back of national work, progress to something else down the line. Don't know whether anybody else has got anything else to add to that.
I think you've expressed it exactly how it is. Yeah, it's the same thing with the method audits, is that we're looking at the data platforms that are out there and that people are using, have got experience with, and we're looking at eventually producing some guidance for people about what might be suitable, and not everybody will want to use the same one necessarily. One thing we are trying to do is to make sure that the data platforms that people use to store and interpret and visualize the data will allow data to be swapped and transferred, so that one data platform doesn't necessarily talk to another, but you can get the data out and you can put the data in. So that's one of the really important criteria, because people will want to share data from different organizations and from different places.
I guess just touching on the element there relating to EA data and the CABA databases, yeah, where we can, we'll try and incorporate that data within what we ultimately produce, be it the scorecard or something similar.
Thank you. Okay, the next question: is there any scope to monitor for pesticides in the river? That's something that you looked at, Alice.
No, not yet, but it is something that was raised, and I suspect this is perhaps where it's come from the Y meeting on Friday, was the kind of issue around pesticides. It's not something that we've considered yet, but I think it's certainly something that when we said about adding different parameters on, once we've kind of got a template, so to speak, for this monitoring, I think, yeah, there's certainly a lot of scope for looking at the impact of pesticides. And I'd like to think, if building, that's something we can build in down the line, but it's not something that we're looking at from sort of stage 0, so to speak.
Thanks, Alice. The next question is going to be for you as well, again. So could you just say a little bit about how we're collaborating with groups like Surfers Against Sewage, and I saw someone mention the 7F partnership as well, with our litter pick and big clean events, so that we can kind of share what we're doing together.
Yep. So yeah, we're absolutely in touch with Surfers Against Sewage in terms of the work that they're carrying out for their bathing designations, and then them supporting community groups. So we are having regular discussions, informing them of kind of what we're doing. They're keeping us informed of where they're working. If we are able to support groups that they're working with, or individuals that they're working with through the project, be that for them to use some of the data that we've collected within an application, then we will. It's definitely sort of two-way line of communication with them. The other one was the 7F partnership. So again, we're working closely with them for the litter picks. So they're promoting through their kind of broader picture. They're really keen to kind of show the impact from source to sea. Obviously their work is largely centered around the estuary and the sea aspect, so we're able to contribute some of the source data to that and the source cleans. So yeah, we're in touch and we're working alongside them for that, along with other national schemes for spring cleans, so Keep Wales Tidy, Keep Britain Tidy, and things like that.
Fantastic, thank you, Alice. So I think now I'm going to take the opportunity to bring the webinar to a close, and I've just a couple of reflections on hearing the presentations and hearing and seeing the questions coming in and responses from people. Is I'm really blown away by the level of enthusiasm. As I mentioned earlier, we didn't know how many people, or if anyone, would sign up for this online event. We thought people might be zoomed out post pandemic. But there certainly is an appetite, and I think it's clear to see there's a level of passion and enthusiasm and interest that we really want to seize. This is our opportunity to get that support so that it's really making a difference for the river. So thank you very much to everybody who's attended. And I'd also like to say thank you to the speakers for your presentations and answering questions, being in the hot seat to answer questions. It's been really interesting discussion. And I know, apologies, there are lots of questions that we didn't get time to answer, but hopefully it has given you some insight into what we're doing, and more importantly, what's coming up and how you can get involved. So please do keep in touch with us. We'll send around a follow-up from this, and we will share the recording. And we would welcome feedback and input from our local people and interested people who want to get involved. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Well done, everybody.
Thank
Well
you.
done, Alice.
We're on time. We managed to fill the time as well.